Hello all, hope you all are doing good. In today's session, we are going to learn nested queries, and there are different categories that are included in nested query. Then we are going to learn what is correlated nested query along with the syntax as well as example query. Firstly, let us know what is a nested query. A subquery is a query within another SQL query and embedded within the where clause is known as a subquery. So the other name for nested query is what? Subquery is the other name for nested query. Now, simply you can define nested query as a query which is present inside and another query is known as a nested query. When you are working with the nested query, it is important to remember all these points which are listed over here. Firstly, why do we have to make use of this nested query? When we are normally working with the single queries, why nested query has come into the picture? Sometimes the requirement may not be achieved, like whenever the data is to be retrieved from the table, so that data may not be retrieved if you're working with a single query. So in that cases, we will be moving on to the nested query. So as discussed before, what is nested query? It is a query which is present inside another query. So whichever query you are writing down inside the another query, that inner query is known as the subquery, or you can call it as inner query. Formally, you call it as nested query. The query which is present outside to this inner query is known as outer query. Or you can call it as a main query, or it is known as parent query. Main or parent query. So it is not that an inner query can be written only one inside the outer query. There can be n number of nested queries which can be represented inside and subquery. Here we have several rules. So let us see what are they. A subquery can be placed in a number of SQL clauses like where clause, from, and then having clause. So any number of queries can be represented or expressed inside these three clauses, namely where clause, from clause, and having clause. Coming to the second point, you can see subquery with select, update, insert, and delete statements. Subqueries are not only used with the select command, it can also be worked with the update, insert, and delete statements, along with some operators which are mentioned over here. And these are the relational operators. And here we have a set of compound operators like in, between, exist, not exist, etc. Third one, a subquery is a query within another query, as we have discussed above, and the outer query is known as the main query, or it is known as the parent query, and the inner query is known as the subquery, or it is known as the nested query. Subqueries are on the right side of the comparison operator. So whenever you are writing a subquery or a nested query, that query is present after the operator. After the operator symbol, we are going to write a nested query. And remember, the nested query is always expressed in parentheses. This is what is the next point. A subquery is enclosed in parentheses, right? Whenever you write an outer query, it need not be in parentheses, but make sure that the nested query is always enclosed in the parentheses and it is present immediately after the comparison operator. The last one is, in the subquery, order by command cannot be used, but group by command can be used to perform the same function as order by command. So in the nested query, order by command cannot be used, whereas we can make use of the group by command, depends upon the requirement when you are working with a query. Now let us move on to the next one. Syntax with an example. Here we have a syntax for the nested query. Select column list from table name where relational operator, and then select column list from table name where condition. This is what is our subquery. Inside the subquery, you can write down any number of subqueries. Okay. And as the outer one, which is the statement which we have here, is known as the outer query, or it is known as the main query. Outer query or main query. Now let us see an example. Firstly, before solving this query, we will be knowing what are the different categories that are included in the nested query. So under nested query, we have two different categories, namely non-correlated nested query. And the other one is correlated nested query. What is the difference between these two? Non-correlated nested query is again classified into two types. One is single nested query or simple nested query, and the other one is multi-row nested query. What is the difference between single and multi-row nested query is whenever a single row nested query is being executed, this is going to return only one value as the output. Whereas multi-row nested query, when it is executed, it returns multiple values, more than one value as output. More than So when multi-row nested query is executed, it returns more than one value as output. So this is the difference between the single nested query and multi-row nested query. These two comes under non-correlated nested query. Now let us see the difference between the non-correlated nested query and correlated nested query. Coming to non-correlated nested query, first of all, the inner query will be executed. So once the inner query is executed, you are going to get the output. Now the output of the inner query is taken as an input to the outer query. So when outer query is to be executed, it is going to accept the output of inner query as an input. So this is about the non-correlated nested query. When coming to correlated nested query, the outer query is executed first. Later, we are going to work with the inner query. So can we execute this query using a normal query, a simple query? Suppose that if I'm going to write select asterisk from employee where salary is equal to max of salary. Now, when I am going to execute this query, you're going to face with an error saying that the aggregate functions cannot be applied with the where clause. Max of salary is what it is, a kind of aggregation function. We have several aggregate functions which we have discussed in the previous lecture. Namely, we have count, maximum, minimum, average, and sum. Right. So max is what? It is one among the aggregate function. This aggregate function cannot be directly applied with the where clause. So when you apply, it gives you an error. So thereby, this is a situation where you cannot achieve the resultant set for the given question. Thereby, it is necessary to work with the nested query. So the question, in order to solve with the question, we have a query like this. Select employee name from employee where employee salary is equal to select max of employee salary from the employee table. Firstly, you are going to start with the inner query. So start writing an inner query. What is the question? You have to find out the maximum salary from the employee table. Select max of employee salary from employee table. Here is a table which I have listed, which contains attributes like employee ID, employee name, and salary. So these are the attributes associated with this employee. Now these are the values which I have listed over the attributes. Now the question is, who is the employee getting maximum salary when compared to the other employees? So if the value is already known to the user, simply you can make use of this query writing, select employee name from employee where employee salary is equal to 90,000 because the value is already known from the table. If the value is not known, assume that we have thousands of rows or tuples that are present inside an employee relation. Now among the 1,000 tuples that are present, you have to find out which employee is having the maximum salary. So it is difficult to find out manually. In that case, we will be working with the nested query. So here, when this inner query is executed, it is going to find out the maximum from this salary attribute. So the maximum salary is what? 90K, 90,000. So that data is retrieved and then it is stored in this particular attribute. What it is? Employee salary. Now this resultant which we have obtained from the inner query is taken as an input and it is applied to the outer query. So thereby, once if you start reading the outer query, how it looks like, select employee name from employee where salary is equal to 90,000. Now we are going to find out the employee name from the employee table. So 90,000, the name of the salary is what? Here I have mentioned D. So thereby the output you get for the query is what? Employee name is equal to D. So this is how you have to work with the nested queries. Now let us move on to the next slide and find out what is correlated subqueries. Correlated subqueries is also known as what? Correlated nested queries. Correlated subqueries are used for row by row processing. So here, when you are working with the correlated nested queries, remember the outer query is executed first and then inner query is executed next. Inner query will be executed n number of times based upon the execution of the outer query. And here, the parent statement can include not only the select command, you can also work with the update, delete statements. Here is the syntax which is written for the correlated nested query. So not only the operators, relational operators, which you can work with, along with that, you can also make use of compound operators like in operator, exist operator, not exist operator, between operator, as well as any and all operators. Let us move on to the next slide and find out the example for the correlated nested query. So here is a question. Find all the employees who earn more than the average salary in their department. Let us try to understand the question first. You have to find out the salary of an employee who is earning more than the average salary in their department. So here is the example table. We have several attributes for the employee table like employee ID, employee name, age, salary, and then department. How many departments are listed over here? There are namely 3 departments like COC, ECE, and IT. Now, how many number of employees are working under COC? If you see from the table, there are 3 number of employees. Who are they? A, B, and E. Now, among A, B, and C, which comes under COC department, who is earning more than the average salary of the department? So, if you find out the average salary, that is for COC, 30K plus 20K plus 50K divided by 3. So, approximately you are going to get 33,333. So which of the employees earning more than 33,333? You have to find out the name of the employee. Similarly, you need to work with the other departments like ECE and IT. So this is our question. Now to write the query for it, we have the query like select last name salary. Here I have not included any last name. So in the place of last name, you're going to write employee name, comma, salary. Department ID is nothing but our department. From employees, outer. Now, what is this outer? When you're working with the correlated nested queries, it is necessary to make use of alias name for the employee. So, outer is our alias name. In the place of outer, you can simply write it down as E. Okay. Where salary greater than, this is my outer query. Now, I'm working with the inner query. Select average of salary from employees. Whenever you write any nested query or a correlated nested query, start writing with the inner query. As per the example, I have taken department here. So outer is nothing but your alias name. So in place of outer, I'm going to write E. E dot department, group by department. So it is because we have 3 departments and you have to find out the average salary for the 3 departments. So that is why I have written where department is equal to use alias name of the employee table E dot department. And how we are finding out the average based upon the department. So thereby you need to include this group by clause. Okay. Group by clause is used because you are working based on the department names. Now what happens when this particular query is executed? Once this will be executed for the CSC department, and then it is going to compute the average salaries of the CSC department. So what is the value that we have achieved? 33,333 is the value. So thereby you're not going to calculate any average. Simply you're going to get the tuple as an output. That is employee ID 3 will be retrieved as an output. And coming to IT, under IT department, we have 2 members, namely D and F, and whose salaries are 40K and 50K. And the average of these salaries is what? 45,000. So there is one employee from IT department whose name is F and the salary is 50K, who is earning more than the average salary of the IT department. So thereby this F is retrieved as another tuple in our resultant set. So this is how you have to work with the correlated nested queries. Now I have a question for you. Try to answer this question by pausing the video. The question is, find out or display the employee details from the employee table whose department is same as the department of Hitansha and Jagdish. This is the question. To find out the Jagdish and Hitansha in which department they are working. So I'm writing the inner query as select department from employee table where employee name is equal to Hitansha or we have another employee. So employee name is equal to Jagadish. This is my inner query. So when this query is executed, what happens? In which all departments Hitansha and Jagdish are working, that will be retrieved as output. The department name will be retrieved as output. Now you are comparing that output with the outer query. Okay, either of the condition you are working, and if either of the condition is true, then the result will be taken as an input to the outer query. So I have to display the other employee details who work in the same department where either Hitansha or Jagadish are working. So select asterisk from the table name employee where department name, that is department in, starting with the nested query. When you are working, when the nested query returns only one value as output, then that value can be compared by using any of the operator like is equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equal to. But when this inner query is returning more than one value, you may not work with the operators like is equal to and all those. You have to make use of a compound operator as we have discussed in the previous lecture. Now you are retrieving the employee details whose detail matches with the resultant of the inner query. Now when this is executed, let us see what is the output that you are going to get. So this is the output which you are going to get. This is the resultant set which we have obtained excluding the details of the employees who comes under IT department, because these two are the persons who comes from only CESC and ECE. So thereby IT department details are excluded in our output. Hope you have understood today's session. Let us meet in the another session. Thank you.